Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Great. How are you?
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You are sideways. I don't know if you can do anything about that though, but
I am what?
you're, you're sideways, like
So
you're
you're sideways too.
weird.
You're sideways on my screen.
Weird. Hold on. I'm gonna try to. Am I sideways?
There,
There. Okay.
you're good there.
All right. Well, it's fixed. You're not sideways anymore over here.
Well, okay.
Well, that was weird. Well, hello. How are you doing?
How you doing? I'm glad we can finally get together and make this work.
Me too. I'm sorry. I didn't even think about you lived in a different place, and I don't know
Well, I got
why.
to tell you, I'll be honest with you. It's not the first time. I was going to be the guest speaker at a major South American animation festival in Chile, and we've
Wow.
been talking about it for months. And the organizer thought that we were in the same time zone, but we weren't. And so, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and I finally gave up and went to bed. And then an hour later, boom, there they were. So it's not the first time, believe me.
Good
I got.
grief.
Where do you live? Where are you?
In New Orleans. I'm an MC and a DJ on Bourbon Street.
Oh, I almost went to New Orleans once. I went there on a jazz cruise, and we docked in New Orleans for 2 or 3 days. But my wife took ill, and I pretty much stayed on the boat. So I've never, even though I've been to New Orleans, I've never actually been to New Orleans. So
Ah, man, you would like it, especially if you like jazz. You like jazz a lot?
I love jazz. Yeah, I love jazz. One of our favorite jazz singers, Cyril Ami, um, lived in New Orleans for many years. Just moved down to Costa Rica or someplace like that, but she lived in New Orleans for many years. Yeah, I love jazz.
Ah, man, yeah, you would love Frenchman here. That's like, you probably know what that is, but it's almost like bourbon, but it's like of jazz, and it's
Yeah,
very cool.
I
It's
love
all
it.
like, old timey, and a lot of the bands dress up like they're in like the
I
30s
know,
and stuff.
I know exactly. I've seen videos of it. I know exactly. In fact, when we were on that jazz cruise and we were docked in New Orleans, they brought a couple of bands on board. The Preservation Hall Jazz Band came on board. Uh,
Wow.
and, yeah, and a couple of others came on board and played for us. So I did get to experience some New Orleans jazz music, even though I didn't get to experience New Orleans. I did have, what is that pastry thing that you guys are always eating down there?
Vignette.
Vignette. Yes, I did have a vignette. So it wasn't a complete loss for me. But
Yeah, those are really good. We have a place here that sells them that is called ah, what's it called? Anyway, I forget the name of it, but it's a super famous place that everybody goes. It's probably best I don't say the name, but they only let you pay cash, and so
mm-hmm.
the ideas floating around that maybe they're not quite legal in some of their actions. There's a lot of places like that in New Orleans.
a money laundering place that deals in vignettes. That's good.
In New Orleans, that makes so much sense, though. But so I read like 95% of your book so far because I hadn't read it yet. And I was like, well, I need to read it definitely before we talk because absolutely have always loved that movie. I thought it was so great and so interesting and so well done. And so I was like, I've got to get to read the book. So I was reading it and I really liked it. And there was a few things that they did not put in the movie that I really wish they would have
Mm-hmm. Like
because
what?
they made the he's basically a comic character instead of a cartoon character. Is
Mm-hmm.
that and I thought it was so cool how the word balloons and stuff
Yeah.
were in there.
Yeah.
And
Well, when we record, I'll tell you why that couldn't happen, why that didn't happen, because
oh,
that was there.
we're going. We're good.
Oh, we're
We're all,
going now.
oh
Oh,
yeah.
geez. Oh man, did I say anything that I shouldn't have said?
No,
Uh,
no.
okay, yeah. Well, what happened was when we were making the movie, um, they they tried a lot of different a lot of different approaches because uh, they love the book. They just love the book, and they thought that this book was going to make a fantastic movie. And so the first thing that they tried was doing it using the word balloons, the way I had done it in the book, where a character speaks, and because they're newspaper cartoon characters, newspaper comic characters, and comic book characters, when they speak, a word balloon comes up, and you don't talk to them, you read them. And if they turn around, then their word balloon turns around, you have to read them in reverse. And if you get shot with a tuned gun, it produces a bang balloon, and then you can then match that bang balloon with another bang balloon and see if it came from the same gun. And when people played piano, when a tune plays the piano, the notes kind of drift up and up and up, and people will take the notes and cut them into 8x12 sheets, and that's where sheet music comes from. So I had a lot of fun playing with that, and there are just visual things like that all through the book that kind of require that a reader engage his or her imagination. It's a very reader specific book. Readers get into it and they can visualize it. So they wanted to use that concept when they did the movie, but they realized pretty early on that when they did that, if a cartoon character talked and put up a word balloon, and then the actor had to read the word balloon or whatever, or the audience had to read the word balloon, it became a silent movie.
Right.
It became a movie with subtitles, and it became obvious pretty early on that wasn't going to work. So we changed it to cartoon characters who speak, and it worked fine. The problem for me, creatively, was when I did the sequel novel, which is plugged Roger Rabbit, where we standardized on the 4-piece stutter. When I did the sequel novel, everybody in the world has seen the movie. At last count, I think something like 2 billion people have seen the movie. Wow. And like 15 people have read the book, like you, my mother, my 5 aunts, and 3 people who bought it at a used bookstore or something. I don't know. But, people who know Roger Rabbit from the movie, not the book. So when I wrote the sequel book, I had to decide how I was going to treat that. Am I going to go with the Disney version, or am I going to stay true to my version, which is more noir, darker, more brooding, more adult? And I did not Disneyfy it. I stuck with a more brooding adult kind of theme. I did change the tunes a little bit. I gave them the ability to talk. They can talk if they want to, but it's hard for them. So they prefer using word balloons because that's easier. Jessica very rarely uses a word balloon just because she likes the sound of her own voice, as do I. And so she tends to speak. But yeah, that was a problem for the movie people, and it was eventually a problem for me. When I did the third Roger Rabbit novel, Who Whacked Roger Rabbit, I went entirely back to the concepts of the first novel, and that one is very, very dark, brooding, noir, mysterious, not at all Disney. And but I did like the fact that tunes could either talk or not talk and use word balloons. So I kept that. And people have often pointed out when they read my books, you read the first book and then you read the second book, and things happen in the second book, like Roger and Jessica have a baby in the second book. Now, spoiler, if you haven't read it, Roger and Jessica have a baby. But in the third book, the baby disappears. In the second book, Jessica has a twin sister named Joellen, who is exactly like Jessica. They're identical twins, except that Joellen is only 6.5 inches high. So they're not quite identical twins. And I had a lot of fun playing with her because she had a romantic relationship with Eddie in the second book. And it was, kind of fun imagining how a 6.5-inch woman could have an affair with a human detective. That was a lot of fun. But, she disappears in the third novel. And people say, well, what happened to these characters? Like the Marvel universe has this litany of characters, and people put together progressions, and this character did this and did this and did this, and they all kind of tie together. I'm a little loosey goosey. I play fast and loose with the rules of Toontown. Whatever I say goes, and I'm the Lord High poobah of Toontown, and and I make the rules. And I tend to look at my novels and Toontown in general as the kind of the same way I used to look at the cartoons that I saw when I watched cartoons when I was a kid. You would go see Bugs Bunny, and in one movie, Bugs Bunny would be a cowboy, and in the next movie, Bugs Bunny would be a hillbilly, and in the next movie, Bugs Bunny would be dressed as a woman. And there was no relationship between one cartoon and the other, and that's kind of the way I see Toontown. Whatever's funny goes.
It's like episodic, like SpongeBob or Looney Tunes or anything like that, because there are things that happen and then they're just gone. I get that. I think that's a better way to do things anyway. Gives you more. You don't want to paint yourself into a corner with stuff, so it lets you.
The other thing is, I don't really. People expect that authors remember every single word they've ever written, but I don't. And sometimes people will come to me and say, wow, I really like what you did here in this chapter. And I will have to say, well, could you tell me what that is? Because I don't remember it. And if I don't remember what I wrote in a chapter, I for sure don't remember the progression of characters and who was doing what to who. I do them book to book to have a good time and to write an enjoyable story, and whatever works. And then if that character works in the next novel, they come back. If not, well, you never hear from them again. And that's, you see that all the time in lots of other places too. I mean, they do it all the time. They used to do it in cartoon strips. In cartoon strips, cartoon strip characters would have a baby, and then boom, the baby would disappear. There was no more baby. Whatever happened to the baby? They ate the baby for Thanksgiving. I don't know. So that's kind of the way I work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when you made these characters, obviously they were not exactly the same as they were in the movie, or maybe they were, but it seems like you had a different, like Roger was like a different color. So how much of the movie was actually the way you had envisioned it as far as the characters?
The characters, I'd say 80%. When we were doing the movie, I sat down with Dick Williams, who was the lead animator. And Dick Williams won the Academy Award for the Pink Panther, and terrific animator. So Dick sat down with me and said, look, we're going to visualize these characters. And that was something that I had never thought about, because I had seen them in my head, but I had written them down, and I had never actually, drawn. I can't draw. I'm a writer, not an artist. Some guy just wrote me today and said, hey, can you send me a picture of Jessica Rabbit? And I can send you a stick figure, but that's about all. I'm not an artist. So Dick Williams, who is an artist, sat down with me, and we drew, or he drew while I described what I saw as characters. And Jessica was based on a character called Red Hot Riding Hood, who was a character in Tex Avery cartoons in the 30s and 40s. She got her start in a movie called Red Hot Riding Hood. And then I think she was in one called Wild and Wolfie, Swing Shift Cinderella.
I know what you're talking about. The wolf is at the table going like, "Arr!" like freaking out.
Swing Shift Cinderella. Yeah, that's the one. You see that meme all the time. And I based Jessica on Red Hot Riding Hood as a cartoon character, but also a couple of live actresses, Veronica Lake, Rita Hayworth, Betty Grable. And if you look at it, some of those old Tex Avery Red Hot Riding Hoods, you'll see that Red Hot has basically the same hourglass shape. She has the same hair, the same general look as Jessica. We made Jessica a little more, I hesitate to say the word human, but a little more human than Red Hot. Red Hot is clearly a cartoon character, and Jessica moves with a slower grace than Red Hot did, and she is more of a human being than Red Hot. But basically, that's where that came from. And that's the way I described her in the book, because that was the way I saw her. Roger, I described in the book as wearing, red overalls, polka dot tie. He was a brown rabbit, and I did that because at the time I wanted to do my main character as a rabbit, because I wanted him to have a Disney feel. And this was way before I ever got involved with Disney, but I wanted him to have a Disney feel. And Disney didn't really have a rabbit. They had Thumper and a bunch of second banana rabbits, or second carrot rabbits, I guess. They didn't have a starring lead rabbit like Bugs Bunny. They didn't have that. So I looked at what the rabbits that they had, and Bugs Bunny was kind of gray, and I thought that Disney should have a nice brown rabbit. So I did him brown. When I talked to Dick Williams, Dick suggested that we change him to white, just because, and you can see it here. I mean, you can see it behind me. A white rabbit pops more out of the background.
Okay.
If Roger was brown, he would fade into the background. And
yeah.
That's pretty much, and Dick showed me, he did a brown rabbit, he did a white rabbit, he did a black rabbit, he did all different colored rabbits. And when you looked at them against the background, the white rabbit popped, and the rest of the rabbits kind of faded into the background. So he became a white rabbit. Dick thought that he needed some distinguishing characteristic. And so Dick added that little orange top knot that you see up there, which I'm fine with that. I thought that was brilliant. And and that was Roger. Baby Herman was pretty easy. He's exactly as I describe him in the book. And Baby Herman is probably, of all the characters, Baby Herman is probably my most successful, because I based him on a number of adult baby characters that used to be in comic books and comic strips back in the 30s and 40s. There was a baby Hugo. There was a baby Huey. There were all kinds of kind of adult babies. And so I based Baby Herman on him, although most of the adult babies that were in the comics in the 30s and 40s were human sized. I mean, adult sized. I made Baby Herman a baby who was baby sized. And had his top knot, his little top knot with the bow in it, and smoked a cigar, and pretty much as I described him. The harder part than what they looked like was what they sounded like. Because, as I say in the book, they spoke in word balloons. And so even in my head, I never heard them. Because I always read them. They made word balloons, and I always read them. So I had no idea what they should sound like. And so Bob Zemeckis, who was the director, brought in Kathleen Turner, who he'd worked with Kathleen in Romancing the Stone, and said, let's listen to her and see what she does with the Jessica voice. And of course, I mean, she was amazing. She just nailed it, just amazing. But she did the recording of that early on before any of the animation had been done, before any filming had been done. The voice recording was one of the first things we did. And she, when you describe the movie to her, cartoon rabbit and a detective investigating a mystery in a world where cartoons are real, you got no idea if this is going to be a good movie or Howard the Duck. I mean,
right.
you don't know. And she didn't know. So she agreed to do it for Bob. And she would do it, but not take screen credit for it. And this is James Earl Jones did the same thing in Star Wars. He was the voice of Darth Vader. And
weird.
And he did it. Yeah, when they did Star Wars, I mean, nobody knew if that was going to be any good. So he did it without taking screen credit for it. And that way, if the movie was a bomb, he would just kind of fade into the woodwork and nobody would ever know. And if the movie was a big hit, then he would be the mystery man who did the voice of Darth Vader. And so Kathleen did the same thing with the voice of Jessica. And if you read the credits, Kathleen Turner's not mentioned in the credits. And I get a lot of comments on that. People say, well, what was it with Disney that they didn't put Kathleen Turner in the credits? Well, her choice. I mean, she chose not to be in the credits. The interesting thing was when we were recording her, and it came time for her to sing the song, the Jessica song, Why Don't You Do Right? She was pregnant at the time, and whether she didn't have breath control or whether she just can't sing, I don't know, but she couldn't sing. So Steve Spielberg was there with his wife at the time, was Amy Irving. And so Steve looked at Amy and said, "Hey, Amy, you sang in Yentl. Why don't you give it a whack?" And I said, "Geez, Steve, nobody is going to believe that Jessica has one voice when she sings and a totally different voice when she speaks. Nobody's going to believe that." And he said, "No one really noticed." And really, nobody ever did. It helps that the song comes early on and Jessica doesn't speak until much later. But Amy Irving took screen credit. And if you read the credits, you'll see singing voice of Jessica Rabbit, Amy Irving. So we needed to find somebody to do the voice of Roger. And, we looked at a lot of voice actors. And then one day we went to a comedy club in LA and saw a guy named Charlie Fleischer.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Yeah, and Charlie had made a name for himself on. He replaced John Travolta on Welcome Back, Kotter, and he'd done some bit parts, but he was mostly a stand-up comedian, very funny stand-up comedian. But that was what he did, and he wasn't known as a voice actor. I don't even know if he'd done any voice acting then. But we went to see his comedy show at I can't remember the club, but he did this funny bit about Donald Duck having an orgasm. And it was just hilarious. I mean, it made no sense at all, but it was just hilarious. And so we brought him in and, said, "Here's what we're looking for. What can you do?" And he gave a couple of takes, couple of different shadings, and nailed the voice. He just came up with the voice. And so we sat down with Charlie, me, and Dick Williams. And Dick Williams believed that every successful cartoon character, major cartoon character, had some kind of a speech impediment. Daffy Duck lisps, and Porky the Pig stutters, and Sylvester spits, and they all have some kind of a speech impediment. So Charlie tried a lot of things and finally came up with the stutter on P.
Mm-hmm.
and it worked really well. And so that kind of became Roger's signature signature voice. So the other hard part was finding somebody to play Eddie Valiant, because Eddie Valiant was the most important character in that movie, because he was the one who had to convince the audience that that rabbit was real. If Eddie Valiant didn't convince the audience would lose their belief and the whole movie would flop. I mean, that's part of the problem with Howard the Duck. Nobody believed that duck was real. It didn't look real. It was a little guy in a duck suit. So, we started looking for somebody to play Eddie Valiant, and everybody wanted Harrison Ford. I wanted Harrison Ford, but when we told him that the filming would take 4 years, he couldn't commit to that. And so then we said, well,
that's crazy. I didn't realize. I knew that they had been working on it for a long time, but did they shoot?
Well, they started working on it in 1980, but it really got serious in 1985 and was released in 1988. So basically 4 years. And so he went to Paul Newman, and same deal. He couldn't commit to that. So we were looking at different actors. William Peterson, who was doing, I think, CSI, and I think William Peterson, I think, could have done a good job. But then we found the guy that everybody thought was, this is the perfect Eddie Valiant. We wanted a bankable guy. Somebody that the audiences knew, somebody who would bring people into the theater, because this was still kind of an unproven concept, and we didn't know if people were going to go to this movie. So we wanted somebody with some star appeal. So we found the perfect Eddie Valiant, and that, of course, was Bill Murray. We brought Bill Murray in and gave Bill Murray a contract, and Bill Murray was Eddie Valiant, except that Bill Murray could not convince anybody that rabbit was real. Bill Murray believed that rabbit was real. Bill Murray would go, "You're a talking rabbit. What are you doing here?" So after about a week of that, everybody realized this wasn't going to work. So they bought him out of his contract. He got $1 million.
Wow.
To buy out of his contract, and we kept looking. And so we're looking. Finally, we find the guy who is the perfect Eddie Valiant. And that guy, of course, is Eddie Murphy. So we've now got a black Eddie Valiant. And, after a week of that, we're suddenly rewriting the screenplay to make the Eddie Valiant funnier than the tunes. And so this isn't working, right? So Eddie Valiant gets $1 million to buy out of his contract and a Ferrari.
Wow.
Yeah. And, so, we keep looking. Well, in the meantime, over on the other side of Hollywood, Brian De Palma is making the Untouchables movie. And he really wants Bobby De Niro to play Al Capone. But Bobby De Niro was unavailable. He's making another movie. So De Palma goes with a second choice, who is a British actor named Bob Hoskins. So Bob Hoskins is Al Capone in The Untouchables. Well, after about 2 weeks of filming, De Palma gets a call from De Niro, and he says, "Hey, guess what? I wrapped early. I can be in your movie. I can be Al Capone." So Bob Hoskins gets fired. He's got $1 million and nothing to do, right? So we say to him, it wasn't me. It was Spielberg and Zemeckis who said, "Let's bring in this Hoskins guy, see what he can do." And I said, "Geez, I'm a big admirer of him. I saw him in The Long Good Friday. I saw him in Mona Lisa. I thought he's brilliant actor. But British." I said, "He's British. He's not just British. He's Cockney British. He's got this horrible Cockney accent. This is the prototypical LA private eye. You cannot have him with a Cockney British accent. Well, let's bring him and see what he can do." So we brought him in, gave him the script. He did a scene, and he did it on a bare stage, just him. he spoke in a perfect American accent, not only American, but LA American accent. And as he was doing the lines, he made you believe that rabbit was real. He made you believe it. And
He did.
yeah, he did. And this was first time through, so we hired him. And he's a great guy, and I miss him greatly. We hung out during the movie, and afterwards he came to Boston to film Mermaids, and we hung around when he was in Boston. And he told me that by the end of the filming of Roger Rabbit, he could see the rabbit. The rabbit was as real to him as I was. And he said it took about 6 months afterward before the rabbit finally disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah. And, he did the most incredible job of acting I have ever seen an actor do. I mean, he made it all up in his head and convinced you that it was real. I mean, there were times when he was on a stage with a green screen behind him and there was nothing. There was nothing. And he's acting. And for instance, when he's handcuffed to Roger, next time you watch the movie, take a look at that, because he's handcuffed to Roger. And those handcuffs are on springs.
Right.
Spring. So not only is he moving his hand, how he moves his hand controls how he moves the rabbit's hand. So he's moving his arm. He's got to remember where his arm's supposed to be. He's got to remember where the rabbit's arm's supposed to be. And so he's moving in like 3 different directions over 4 different axes. And he brings it off flawlessly. He had to make sure that where he was looking would be eye contact with the rabbit. And of course, there was no rabbit. I mean, a rabbit came later. So he never missed. He was always looking exactly where the rabbit's eyes would be if the rabbit was there. And, people ask me, are you happy with the movie? And I'm overjoyed with the movie. And they say, do you have any regrets? And the only regret I have from the movie is that Bob Hoskins did not even get nominated for an Academy Award for that movie. And he did the best acting job that I have ever seen an actor do anywhere, anytime. It was just amazing.
He impressed me a lot. Watching that movie, I was like, man, this guy, he's killing it. Because I'm an actor. And also that type of acting, y'all were basically developing a completely different style of acting that was probably never, maybe done a few times, but probably never done up until that point. That's almost...
it had been done, but not to that level. There have been other movies that combine live action and animation, going all the way back. Walt Disney did one in the late 30s, Alice in Wonderland, where Alice was a real girl. Little known movie, but Alice was a real girl. And then you had animation in Gene Kelly dancing with Jerry the Mouse. Gene Kelly, the tap dancer, was dancing with Jerry the Mouse. You had live action animation in Mary Poppins with Mary Poppins and Dick Van Dyke dancing with the penguins, which those penguins in Roger Rabbit are the same penguins from They were all retired. We brought them all out of retirement and put them back to work. But the difference is, in all of those early live action animation things, they locked down the camera. The camera did not move. And the actors danced in front of the camera or acted in front of the camera. And then the animators came in and did the drawings over it. And the reason for that is that if you move the camera, you change the perspective. Mm-hmm. So if you're animating, the animation is done in cells, and a cell is a drawing, and film goes through the camera at 24 frames a second. So you have to do 24 drawings or 24 cells per second to match up with it. If the perspective changes constantly, then every single cell has to be redrawn. And in the early days, you could get by with locking the camera down And you would have to draw the main character, but all the background and all the other bits didn't have to be redrawn. They just stayed that way. But with Roger Rabbit, as the camera's moving, everything has to be redrawn. That opening scene with the cartoon where something's cooking, where Roger is taking care of baby Hermit, he's in the kitchen and he's running around. Dick Williams animated that scene personally himself. He did all the drawings. Wow. And he did it because he wanted to open the movie with something that was so fantastic in the scope of animation that animators would look at it and say, wow, just their jaws would drop. And when animators see that, that's what happens. And why is that? Well, first of all, when Bob Zemeckis said to Dick Williams, how do you want me to position the camera in this movie? And Dick Williams said, just shoot this movie like any other movie, and we'll take care of it. The animators will take care of it. So if you look at that first scene, the perspective is constantly changing, all right? Mm-hmm. And the thing that brings that bit of animation to a whole nother level is the floor. Look at the floor, because the floor is black and white tile.
Right.
In any other animated movie, that would be a gray floor. Because with black and white tile, every 24th of a second, as the camera moves, the perspective changes on every single tile. So every single cell has to be redrawn. And then he takes it up a notch from that. Not only does he have a black and white tile floor with the perspective changing constantly, he shows Roger's reflection in the floor. Mm-hmm. So it's like unbelievable. It's jaw-dropping animation. And when animators see that, they just go crazy. The other scene in it that not many people notice, but which is really incredible animation, is when Eddie and Roger and Dolores are in the little storeroom behind the bar. And I think it's Roger. He hits his head on the light, and the light starts going back and forth, back and forth. And the shadows from the light play over Roger, over Eddie, over Dolores, and the shadows are going back and forth. Well, that's an incredibly difficult piece of animation. Yeah, because you have to shade the animated characters to match the light that's going back. And in fact, it was so hard, but it worked out so well that now whenever an animator does a really spectacular piece of animation, they refer to that as bumping the lamp.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That was so cool. Like, I watched a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and like, that was just phenomenal. Like, they did so much like groundbreaking stuff in it. It was a good movie. It was an amazing movie. What were you like thinking? What was going on in your life when you wrote this? Like, what inspired you to make this?
When I wrote it, well, what happened was I started writing science fiction. I wrote science fiction short stories, and wrote a ton of them, and never had a reject. I mean, I would write them, send them off to a science fiction magazine, get published. So I decided I would, instead of writing 12 short stories, I would write one novel. So I wrote a novel called Killer Bowl, which is still my most popular science fiction novel. It's a dystopian novel about football played in the future as a blood sport. It kind of introduced elements of the Hunger Games. I introduced elements of worldwide wrestling, hand-to-hand combat. People play it with weapons. But this was 1976 before any of this happened. So, I wrote that novel, and my agent sent it to Doubleday. And Doubleday said, yeah, this is great. Wow, great. So they gave me a contract for that one and for 3 more. So I had a 4 book deal. Anything I wanted to write, they would publish. So my second one was called A Generation Removed. The third one was called The Resurrectionist, all science fiction. And I came to the fourth one, and I wanted to do my fourth novel. I wanted to do with that something that nobody had ever done before, something that I'd never done, something that hadn't been done. I wanted to combine the loves of my life, which were cartoons, comic strips, and noir mysteries. I wanted to combine those in a novel, and not easily done. So, I was sitting at home one Saturday watching Saturday morning cartoons for research. I told my wife I would just and I became fascinated not with the cartoons themselves, but with the commercials, because I saw cartoon characters, the Trix Rabbit, Captain Crunch, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, cartoon characters talking to real kids, and nobody seemed to think that was odd. I said, geez, what a great idea for a novel. What if you had a novel where cartoon characters were real? What if you had that world and I wrote a novel in that world? What kind of a world would that be? So I spent a year just researching all the various things that cartoon characters do that would be, amazing in a human world, like word balloons and like having a drink and, exploding like you saw in the, all of that kind of stuff. And I wrote the book, and it was clearly the best book I'd ever written. I mean, it was a brilliant book. And I'm not being modest. I mean, my mother will tell you the same thing. Anyway, so I sent it to Doubleday, and I said, here's the fourth book in my 4-book deal. And, about a couple of weeks went by, and my agent called me. My editor called me up and said, I'm sorry, we rejected it. First reject I'd ever had in my life. I'd never had a reject, and they rejected the book, which was called Who Censored Roger Rabbit? And so I said, sure, why did you do this? I mean, this is clearly the best book I've ever written. She said, oh, yeah, I agree. It was a brilliant book, but it was so different from anything you've ever written before, so different from anything anybody's ever written, that I had to send it to the marketing department. And the marketing department rejected it. So I called the marketing department, and I said, hey, Charlie, why did you reject this book? And the marketing department said, well, we all thought it was hilarious. We loved it, but there's no category for it on the bookstore shelves. It's not a regular mystery. It's not a regular adult novel. It's not a children's book. It's not a science fiction book, really. It's not a fantasy. There's no category for it on the bookstore shelves. I can't sell this book. And I said, okay, what would you do if somebody gave you Gulliver's Travels or The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland? What would you do with those? And he thought about it for a minute. And he says, I couldn't sell those either. So I went back to my agent and I said, Bill, you know what? What am I going to do here? If I can't write this, if I can't publish this, I don't want to be a writer anymore, because this is what I want to write. I want to write this. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. He says, we'll find, it's a great book. We'll find a home for it. So he started sending it out to other publishers, other editors at the same publisher. And along the way, it got 110 rejects. It was rejected 110 times.
What?
And, yeah, my wife, in those days, rejects used to come in the mail. They didn't come by email like they do today. They came by mail. And my wife used to call me going out to the mailbox every day, the daily disappointments, because I would go out there and there'd be 4 or 5 rejects. And I'm bringing it back. And so 110 rejects. Finally, the book landed on the desk of a woman at St. Martin's Press, a woman named Rebecca Martin, no relation to St. Martin's Press, just had the same last name.
Huh.
And she had just published a major bestseller for them. So the president of the company gave her a vanity project. He said, all right, you can publish whatever book you want. Anything you want to publish, we'll publish it. And just at that moment, Who Censored Roger Rabbit come across her desk. So she read it and she loved it, like all the editors had who before her. So she bypassed the marketing department, went to the president of the company, put it on his desk and said, here's the book I want to publish. Here it is. So he said, okay, let's take it home. I'm going to read it. I'm going to get back to you in the morning. So he took it home, read it that night, came back the next morning and called her into his office. Said, Rebecca, he said, I told you you could publish anything you wanted, but you can't publish this because I can't sell it. And Rebecca stepped up to the plate and said, either publish it or I quit. And so they published it. Yeah, they published it in very small quantities, 5,000 copies, which is actually nothing. And, people ask me, what would you do if you could, relive your life? Would you do anything differently? And I think about it. And what I would do differently, if I had a time machine, I would go back in time to 1981 when that book came out. And I would buy all the copies because they sold for $2.98 in 1981. What? Yeah, $2.98. And if you can find one on eBay today, it's well north of $400. So I would have all 5,000. I would have put them in a barn somewhere, and today I'd be a very wealthy man. But anyway, so they bought the book, and it took about a year. They bought it in 1980. It came out in 1981, and in that year period, I get this call at home on my home phone. And it's this guy. He says, is this Gary K. Wolf? I said, yes, it is. He says, this is Roy Disney from the Disney Corporation. And I said, yeah, right. Roy Disney calling me at home. That's choice. They said, who's this really? He said, no, it's really Roy Disney. He said, and I just read your book. I said, yeah, you read my book. It hasn't even come out yet. He says, and it turned out that somebody at St. Martin's had sent Disney a copy of the manuscript. And I desperately tried to find out who, so I could kiss her or him full on the lips, but I never found out who did it. And they sent it with a note saying, we think we're going to publish this. We think you'd like it. And it turns out they did like it. They liked it a lot. They needed a movie. They needed a blockbuster movie in 1980 because they had become a second-rate movie house. They were making movies like The Nutty Professor and Flubber and the Black Hole and the Black Cauldron, which disappeared down the black hole. They were not making big movies. They'd been offered E.T., they turned it down. They'd been offered Star Wars, they turned it down. They needed something to leapfrog them back into prominence again, and they saw this as the movie. Plus, I don't know if you notice or not, but as you're walking down the street, you see a whole lot of T-shirts and jackets and hats with Disney characters on them. Right? Disney makes a ton of money selling merchandise. Well, they saw this as being a new source of character merchandise for them. Mickey Mouse was still around, but he was kind of the corporate spokesmouse, and you couldn't really have a lot of fun with him. Right. Donald Duck, you could have fun with him, but nobody can understand what he said, so he was kind of worthless. So they saw Roger, Jessica, Baby Herman as characters they could merchandise. So and they offered me more money than I'd made on everything I'd written put together, and even though I did not think that this book was filmable because of, the word balloons and the dark tone and, just being a noir mystery, I did not think this book was filmable. Go ahead, give it a try. And for the first, probably year and a half, they pretty well proved me right. They tried doing it. They tried combining live action animation. And admittedly, a lot of the technology that they needed to do the movie did not exist at that time. In 1985, technology improved logarithmically. And George Lucas at Industrial Light and Magic actually invented stuff for this movie. So, in 1980, 81, 82, the technology wasn't there. So they came to me and they said, look, instead of doing this as live action animation, how about if we have the cartoon characters be people wearing costumes like they do at Disneyland? And I'm like, oh Jesus, I'm going to have the Disney stable of characters at the time. I'm going to have Fred McMurray as Eddie Valiant. I'm going to have Haley Mills as Jessica, Dean Jones as the Rabbit, and Kurt Russell as Baby Herman. And I said, don't you think that this is just a little off the concept? Yeah, they agreed. So we went back and went back to the original concept. It would have gone on like that, I'm sure, and it never would have been done. But in 1985, a couple of things happened. Michael Eisner came in, and Roy Disney was forced out. So Michael Eisner took over, and he brought in a guy named Jeff Kassenberg, and they'd worked together in 20th Century and produced Jaws and a bunch of other stuff. And they did something that nobody had ever done before at Disney. They brought in an outside producer to produce a Disney movie. And that guy was a little known guy just getting started in the business named Steven Spielberg. Okay. So Steve Spielberg comes in, right? And, to show you the difference that Steve Spielberg makes in Hollywood, back in 1982 or 3, Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers, said, hey, look, we're doing this live action animated movie. It's going to have all of our characters in it. We would like Bugs Bunny to do a cameo. And we'd like him to just come out, say, hey, what's up, Doc? Eat a carrot. And then he's off, and be on screen for a minute, maybe less. What do you think? And Warner Brothers looked at Roy Disney and said, get lost. There's no way that Bugs Bunny is ever going to be in a Disney movie. That's just never going to happen. So 3 years later, Steve Spielberg goes to Warner Brothers and makes the identical request. We're doing this live action animated movie and I'm producing, and can I have Bugs Bunny for a cameo? And Warner Brothers says, of course you can. What about Porky Pig? Would you want him too? What about Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner? And Tweety and Sylvester and Yosemite Sam? Take them all. Oh. So Steven walked out with all of the Warner Brothers characters, and the only requirement, he had to pay royalties, but the royalties were minor. I could have paid him out of what I earned from my paper route on my bicycle. But the one character that was specific was Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny was a superstar, and so he had a contract. And his contract specified that he had to be in every scene with Mickey Mouse. They were co-equal superstars, and you could not have Mickey in a scene without Bugs. They had to be in every scene together, and they had to have the exact same number of words of dialogue.
Wow.
So if you go watch the movie again, time it, and you'll see Bugs and Mickey in every scene together. Yep.
They're falling together and stuff. The parachute part.
Yeah. And they excuse me, and they have the same number of words of dialogue. Something I just found out. I didn't realize this, but I just found this out. Wait a minute. The Warner Brothers people also wanted their characters in the movie to be the 1980s version of the characters. And if you look at the 1940s version of Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, and the 1980s version, they're different. It's right. Especially Bugs. And the Disney animators wanted to use the 40s version, not the 80s version. So Warner Brothers was insistent. No, we want the 80s version. So the Disney artists did two versions. They did one version with the 40s characters, one version with the 80s characters. They showed the 80s version to Warner Brothers, and they put the 40s version in the movie.
Huh.
Warner Brothers didn't realize it until they saw the movie when it came out.
Ooh.
Yeah, and at first they went ballistic. I mean, about the characters, 80s characters, not the 40s characters. But then, when the movie took off and became the huge hit that it was,
yeah,
they realized that all of a sudden they had another revenue stream. They could start selling merchandise with the 40s characters as well as the 80s characters. So, unfortunately, the animator who did that got fired, but otherwise, a pretty happy ending.
Wow, man, that's neat. Well, I mean, it also went with the story too, because it was based back in that time frame anyway.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's crazy. Just that you got all those characters together, that was amazing. So I'm making a movie myself, and I've been working on it for a year and a half. And I've shot it.
I saw part of it. I saw part of it on YouTube.
Oh, yeah? What'd you think?
It's interesting. I don't know if you know an actress, comedian named Lily Singh. She's Indian, and she does pretty much the same thing that you do. She does comedy bits, plays all the parts, and pretty funny. And I think that yours holds up pretty well. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you very much. In doing that, though, you obviously are somebody that has made it in creating and writing their own work and stuff like that. What is some advice to people like me that you would give as far as like people that are trying to like bust out and make something of their work?
Well, yeah, I think you just had it when you heard the story about 110 rejects. Don't give up. The important thing is to believe in what you're doing and to produce the best whatever it is, movie, book, cartoon, whatever it is, table, if you're a carpenter, whatever it is, produce the best of whatever it is that you possibly know how to do, and don't give up. Just keep trying, and sooner or later you'll succeed. And the thing that I find the most creative people do is they give up too soon. They nowadays, especially when it's harder and harder to get published, people go out to publishers and they get 2, 3, 4 rejects, and they give up. And I say, geez, 110 rejects, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't pleasant, but I never gave up. I'll tell you what happened when the movie came out. It was a huge success that it was. The book went into book club edition, so it came out as another hardcover. Then it went into paperback, and at last count, I think it's up to 36 printings. Yeah, and then I wrote the sequel novel, who plugged Roger Rabbit, and we had 10 publishers bidding for that one. Now, the interesting thing was that all 10 of those publishers had rejected the first novel once. 4 of them had rejected the first novel twice, and one lucky devil had rejected the first novel 3 times. Wow. And they were all bidding on the second novel. So, yeah. So, if you believe in what you're doing, if it's good, and if you believe it's good, don't listen to what other people tell you. Don't listen to what other people say. Keep plugging away at it, and sooner or later you're going to succeed. It's karma. It's the way the creative process works. You have to believe in yourself, and sooner or later you will find that one person who believes in you as much as you do, who will help you out.
Right. Well, you did a great job. Your book is incredible. And I'm very honored to be speaking with you. I've been so so excited about this. Is there anything that you would like to shout out or tell any of the people watching?
Well, yeah, I gotta give a shout out to my website, www.garywolf.com. You can go there and find out everything you want to know about me, my books, whatever. All of my books just recently, within the last year, came out as audiobooks. So you can now, you don't even have to read them now. You can buy them and listen to them. And it's a big improvement over the way I used to do it, because when somebody wanted an audiobook before, I would call them up and I would read it to them over the phone. And so this is a lot better for me personally. It takes a lot less time. I just came out, they just came out a new hardcover version of Who Censored Roger Rabbit. My first novel came out in hardcover again, and it's a kind of a reproduction of that original book that's now going for $400 on eBay. You can get it on my website for I think $30. So go there, www.GaryKWolf.com. You can also read my I don't blog much, but every now and then I do, and you can find out my life story.
Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for coming on. Like, honestly, I'm a huge fan. I have all the stuff. I got a Roger Rabbit
Yes.
toy, got little car. Got I actually have, this is a fan club card from the 80s.
I know it. Oh, I know it well. You are never. I would be flabbergasted if you showed me a piece of Roger Rabbit merchandise that I have not seen, because they used to send me every piece. And at one time, I was just keeping it. I had a barn, and I would keep it in the barn, and then it outgrew the barn. So, but I've seen it all.
I still have. I got these the other day. These are the bubblegum cards. Still from the 80s.
A word of advice. I had boxes and boxes of those. Don't chew the bubblegum.
I was thinking about it. I was actually going to do that for the promotion of this video. I was thinking about it, but
no, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. It's really rancid after 30 years. Stay away from it.
Well, thank you, sir. It was great talking to you.
Sure, my pleasure. I'm glad we were able to work it out. All right.
I'll see you later. Have a good day.
Right. Take care now. Bye.
Bye-bye.